Okay, good morning. I guess we're on time and all set. So welcome to today's release webinar. It's a pleasure to see you here, and I'm here. I'm Terje Vatle, CTO of BI Builders, and I'm here together with my colleague and founder Anja Lug Helland. So let's get ahead and take a look at today's agenda. So today we have two parts of the walkthrough. Part one will be explaining why we focus on Azure, and specifically why we focus on automation for Azure Data Factory. And part two will look closely into how this is done. There's a total of 40 minutes plus Q&A. So for those who are new to the product and aren't that familiar with all the kind of features, we'll give you a brief recap of what the product does and how the automation works. So please leave any questions then in the Q&A tab here in Teams, and we'll be happy to get back those questions towards the end of the session. And this webinar is recorded if anyone wants to look back at this session later. Okay, so let's dive in. First, just a recap of what Xpert BI is and what it does. Xpert BI was born out of the challenges with the data warehouses in the mid-2010s, where it was very work intensive and very difficult to deliver business value quickly enough and achieve end-to-end data governance. So it is a data automation tool, and it uses experience from seasoned data engineers to maximize standardization, simplicity, maintainability, speeding up the delivery time, and also maintaining that the solution will be robust and within the budgets. And it's not only for new development, but also for maintenance, considering the whole data lifecycle. So here, when we talk about data platforms, we think that contains, for instance, a data warehouse, a data lake, but it can also contain other components such as more real-time elements. So key elements of the Xpert BI tool is that it provides a guide to the data engineers with proven platform practice built into the product. So it's a no-code / low-code approach, but where you can also write your SQL code, and that is still managed in the tool. It is a purely metadata-driven tool, end-to-end. It focuses a lot on governance and control. And also, one of the final points is that it provides a lot of flexibility for the organization, meaning that you can switch different parts of the architecture, such as storage, later on. You can also switch the way you execute the code. And we also, right now with today's release, also minimizing any lock-in you may experience. So one question is probably then, what is the difference between Xpert BI and a typical data integration tool in the marketplace? So let's take a look at what Gartner says, and then also our experience. So looking here, what Gartner says is, look at the left-hand side, is that using, in this case, data warehouse automation allows the data engineer to work at a higher level of abstraction. So on the left-hand side, we see the data warehouse automation developers working on the metadata descriptions, and those descriptions then generate the code. And that code can take many different forms, and some of the examples that Gartner has worked out are those mentioned here in the middle. So typical things is coding standards, how to perform testing, how to do source control, architecture layers, how to handle complex data sources such as ERP systems, very granular APIs, but also a lot of other different challenges that you typically run into and you have to define during the project and things that typically are not covered in a standard ETL or ELT or other kinds of data integration tools. So that is the kind of the saving effects, having that being generated. So what we see as an impact in our experience is that the overall picture is that during the data lifecycle, going from extract, ingest through different phases here, we can see that you can save a lot of time on some of the tasks that are more repetitive, more mundane, and can be automated. And that will free up time for those tasks that are more individually needed to be adjusted. So also where there's more of the benefits realization. So of course you can build everything from bottom up, but that will be, in our consideration, more expensive, and especially considering that in our experience, 80% of the total cost of ownership of a data platform is through handling change. So the change handling process should be as efficient as possible. And just also to recap, Xpert BI is a Microsoft partner, and we also acknowledged in several different Gartner papers back to 2017. And we also work closely with both Gartner and TDWI and other analysts to monitor trends and new developments. So let's take a look at the history going back to 2011, where we're coming from and why we're now focusing a lot on Azure Data Factory. So the company started out in 2011, and in 2012, the first data warehouse automation was live in production, ingesting data into a SQL Server on premises. So that process then continued with more transformation, functionality, dependency structure of objects, which is the basis we still use today for governance, documentation, impact analysis, data processing, optimizations, and much, much more. And then we added APIs and more data sources, XML, JSON, and all that. Next point was that we started publishing data not just for reporting and analysis or analytics purposes, but also for data products, for instance, to APIs or to data lakes. So next up, it was to expand the solution, not just covering or helping out the data engineers, but also the business people that are less technically savvy. So then we entered with the solution catalog. The solution catalog focuses on the business user, the data consumer, and it exposes the documentation end to end, and the data lineage, meaning the full transparency of data, where it's coming from and where it's being used. And that was all the way from the data sources through every step of transformation and up to every KPI or other kind of object you may have inside Power BI using the APIs of Power BI made available. So then the next step was going into the Azure cloud. Coming from Microsoft and SQL Server on premises, Azure was a natural first step for us. And we then moved into Azure SQL Database and Managed Instance, where we can also do data processing either in Azure Batch or using Azure Data Factory actually for orchestration. So the next step here was a rather big step. That was going into Azure Synapse, distributed SQL pool, and Azure Data Lake storage. So that was industry collaboration with two large Norwegian enterprises done over a quite long period of time. And we also at that time became partner with Azure Synapse with Microsoft on that product, both for data integration and data management. And we also then tied much closer bonds with Azure, with Microsoft's R&D departments in Redmond. So then today we are here at the Azure Data Factory, and then also Amazon Web Services, S3, and Snowflake ingestion. So this is quite interesting move going forward. We are further strengthening our Azure support, but also going multi-cloud. And in the background, you see schematic of the different emphasis we've had on different technologies, and seeing that on-prem has been quite a stable development and perhaps declining slightly now, where we see Azure taking over much of the focus. And we see Snowflake, Azure Amazon Web Services, and potentially Databricks also being very interesting technologies or platforms going forward. So then the question is probably, why did we go into Azure and why did we go into Azure Data Factory? So let's take a look at first cloud in general and then specifically into Azure Data Factory. So first off, according to Gartner, there are some maturity challenges with cloud in general concerning data management. In addition to what Gartner mentions, there are also a few other considerations for data analytics purposes. So some of these are the growing technology complexity, having complex ecosystems, hybrid clouds, multi-clouds, and choosing different components from a big ecosystem. Another one is the growing business expectations, both for more timely decisions, but also for more advanced insights and analytics. And so there's a lot of more business cases or use cases for the data and much more different types of data. And it's much more complex data management challenges. So having more different diverse data from different sources, from different parts of the organization, and being used in more different parts of the organization requires more standardization, more governance, more data quality. And these are massive data management challenges. Another one is that there's fewer data engineers available, and some data engineers also reskill themselves as data scientists. And then last but not least, one of the main challenges in the cloud is the then price performance of what you get, so the cost predictability. So what we aim at is to complement and coexist with Azure Data Analytics to mitigate some of these challenges. So looking more specifically into Azure Data Factory, there's these four areas that we focus on. Methodology and standardization is some of the is one area where we think about how should you apply the tool to build a robust data platform that is easy to change over time and maintain. The second part is the data governance area, where how you issue documents and also maintain data ownership, enhance that or enforce it throughout the organization, end to end. Productivity parts, how can you minimize the need for manual steps in the parts of the data lifecycle that can be automated? And last, architectural flexibility. How can you at a later point in time switch, for instance, different storage technologies, or for instance, go from a Azure SQL database up to Azure Synapse dedicated SQL pool, for instance. So just to note that these are challenges that you might experience both for new and existing organization customers of Azure Data Factory. So it might not be all of these, but this is what we typically hear from organizations we talk to. And Xpert BI then adds automation and governance to the Azure Data Factory solution. So let's take a look into the release, the main features. So the first part is the auto generation of the Azure Data Factory pipelines. So you can essentially, when building new data ingest pipelines, you don't have to build your own automation framework with for each and so on. That could limit your modularity, documentation, governance, and might lead to some unwanted challenges. So instead, what we propose is that our software Xpert BI has a standardized and automated ingest process where you can export that metadata as JSON code to build all the pipelines and activities natively inside Azure Data Factory, as you would have done if you built everything in Azure Data Factory. So in our view, that is standardization that yields much lower key personnel risk, and also it's easier to later then change, for instance, such as your storage technology or do some adjustments at a later point in time. And the code is then, of course, managed in Git if that is available in your organization. So the second part is the that you can document the lineage of existing Azure Data Factory or existing data factories you may have. So by lineage, we mean then the full transparency of data, where it's coming from back to the data source and through all the processing steps made or done inside Azure Data Factory. So basically what we allow to do is that you can import the JSON code from your data factory and see the complete data lineage and add it to your online documentation. So the third point here is the Azure Data Factory costs, and that is addressing the challenge of transparency of costs and predictability of costs in the cloud. So you can get basically two things. First is the statistics part, where you get a cost breakdown for each factory down to pipelines and activities, and you can optimize price performance and detect anomalies and potentially change if you see one activities or one pipeline is particularly expensive, for instance. You can also, second part is estimation. You can also estimate then the impact of changes at design time. So meaning that you can also predict then what the cost will be before you start running your code inside Azure Data Factory. And that is made possible through our end-to-end dependency graphs of the whole metadata structure. So fourth point here is the ingest into Amazon Web Services, S3. So that's been a customer-driven project where we ingest data into a data lake structure. The fourth step here is the ingest into Snowflake, and that is also a customer-driven project where we ingest data into the Snowflake distributed database. And last out, but not least, is the transformation part of ELT. And that means that you now have a consistent and complete user experience inside Xpert BI with the ability to use a query designer to write or design your code. But you can also edit your SQL code. Either way, it's managed. And it's still possible to use a third-party transformation tool of choice, if you like. So these are the main topics today. I think one of the last things out here is that we've seen quite a lot of attention in the marketplace for new features in Azure, and what we've seen is that based on quite a few different customer evaluations and proof concepts over the last time, we have seen that we are evaluated as the most advanced automation tool for Azure Data Factory, and that's quite a big step forward from then entering the Azure domain a couple of years ago, and now focusing all our resources on Azure, and then slightly now expanding into other clouds. So on the left-hand side, we see some of the companies that we have either new customers or pilots. So from quite a few different industries, such as fish farming, banking, insurance, real estate, and even to pilots in the United States. So we are expanding quite a lot in the United States, and that is also one of the most interesting step forward. Yeah, I think with that, if there are any questions, I think I'll be happy to answer those. I'll just check if anything turned up.
Should we try now tell you to swap?
Absolutely.
Yes. Okay, let's see if this goes smoothly. Okay, so hi everyone, my name is Anja. I'm head of advisory and one of the co-founders of BI Builders, and I will be taking you through the demo today. So first of all, this is just some of the selected main features for the next release. There are, of course, many other features that we're not including here. And my demo scenario are just some made up scenarios. It's not any real data. First, I wanted to, let's see if I can change here. I wanted to show some of you who does not know this already how the application actually works in terms of installation. So Xpert BI is for the developer, like Terje also showed. Xpert BI is an application for the developer that sits on, like Power BI, on the machine of the developer or in an application server. And you can then connect to different ways of storage. You have an application database that can be an Azure DB, and then you can have your data storage in a flexible different variants, SQL, Synapse, or Data Lake, and now you can also do that for Amazon and Snowflake. We also have this solution catalog that you saw on the timeline, which is a web application accessing all these metadata. So that was just brief intro. Then let me switch out of this PowerPoint and into the real thing. Okay, so this is just a screen from Solution Setup where I can also show you that we have a connection for where is my application database and where do I want my data to be stored. In this case, in my demo scenario, it's all on the same virtual machine in Azure, but it can be also a database remotely from that and have that flexibility. So I'll just exit that and continue where my application already was. Like I said, I will not go through all the features, but just to show you, there are a lot of functionality in terms of ingesting different types of data sources, even analysis services data you can ingest. And for databases, there are so many different options as to how you can configure relations and use Excel to edit metadata. And for configurations for each data source, you also have quite a lot of options of table filtering, destination, flexibility, different data load settings, and also slowly changing dimensions and tracking changes of tables. So with that, let's get started. First, I wanted to show you just how easy it is to just add a new data source. If the data source, for example, is a database of nature, let me just get started here. A great data source. like that. So I named my data source. So this could be in the name of an ERP system, the name of a CRM system, the name of your source system. You can also explain it here. I set up the connection to my database, test the connection is okay, and then I go into selecting the tables. So Xpert BI is basically a metadata repository where all metadata from your entire solution is synchronized into the software. And that's what enables all the automation and also documentation and governance. So what it's doing here now, it's importing the metadata from the source in here to say, do I want to actually include all these tables? I say yes. And actually now I have some more steps, but we will not go through those today because it's not the feature of this release webinar. But now just to show you what has been done. So now I have created a metadata structure for my great demo system. I am now able to later revise it, go in and change the primary keys, edit the column names, edit the table names for that system. I can set which table filters do I want to have on these? Do I need an incremental load? Everything is configurable. And last, when I'm happy, I can then load my data. And I do that with the data source processing button, and the data is loaded into my destination, which I configured in my setup. Okay, easy as that. So if I now want to view the data, I can go into my Solution Explorer and reload and find my data in my standardized architecture, which is also installed automatically, finding the tables of, let's just do like that. My great data system right here. And I can also now query the data and see what type of data is here. Okay, so that's just showing you how easy it is to ingest a data source. Say, for example, now I wanted this to be published. I'm happy with the loads. I've set up everything that I wanted, and I wanted now to run this in Azure Data Factory. I then have two options. I can run it as Azure Batch, copy some batch parameters from just a click. Then I get a file name and some arguments that run in Azure Batch and run that as a custom activity in Azure. Or I can from here, sorry, I'm a little bit confused here, like that. I can from here publish this to Azure Data Factory. What does that mean? Well, that means that I can then, after I've done that, run this without having to have Xpert BI anymore. I can also view all the tasks that Xpert BI will be auto-creating. When doing that, I will show you the Data Factory Manager afterwards, but we have a Data Factory Manager of which I have found synchronized my factories. I have also set up an integration runtime so that this virtual machine will communicate with that factory. If I had everything in the cloud, it would be another type, and it could be the auto-resolve runtime. This is also synchronized with the Azure DevOps if you have that enabled for your data factory. And I have that for my data factory. And I cannot click publish until I've written a commit message, which we think is a good practice. A new data source created in demo. Okay, nice. So we have this button here as well, estimate cost. What will that do? Well, right now there's nothing there, so the cost will be whatever is the new cost. The current cost was nothing, and the new cost per run is, yeah, less than $1. Not a lot. Sorry. Okay, so I can I accept those costs and I do the publish. Are you sure you want to publish to the collaboration branch? Are you sure? Yes. Let's see. this is just a demo workaround like that, so that this will work live. I have one set up already if it's not working, but let's try. I want to do it the real way. So this is basically that we need a database access for the data factory, and it will store it in the Azure Key Vault for that factory so that you will be safe with your passwords. Now it's publishing. When it's doing that, in the meantime, I think I will go into my demo data factory. Successfully published. Okay, so here you can see I'm into my Xpert BI demo data factory. I'm in my collaboration branch. I have some data sources already, but let's reload this up here. See, reload. And I should now get my great demo system. Okay, so here is everything that has been auto-generated. Xpert BI has then generated a pipeline, which is basically calling all the other pipelines. And here we also have logic to make sure you don't exceed the limits within each pipeline. So say the number of activities allowed is 40, I think. So if your number of tables exceeds 40, it will be 2 parent pipelines calling that pipeline. So all that is taken care of. I can now say I'm happy with this and then go to publish it to main if I want to. Okay. So let's look at the other feature that I'm demoing today. That was the auto generation of pipelines, or I can also show you one of the other pipelines. It is basically creating table, loading into staging, load to destination, update process successfully, and then there's a post and pre-process of keys here. So you get a whole data model and it's all managed here. Okay, so let's go back into Xpert BI and the Solution Explorer. Since I haven't published it to main yet, I will not get it up here, but I have some other pipelines here. In my Solution Explorer, I can then synchronize Azure data factories. They do not need to be generated by Xpert BI. It can be an existing data factory that you might have. We have a separate data factory manager of where you add your login details for the specific data factories. So then there's some information that you fill in, the tenant, subscription, data factory, and you set which key vault it's linked to, and that's your data factory manager. All those factories will come up in your Solution Explorer. Here in this Xpert BI demo data factory that we just looked at, it's the same as this one. I've created some factories manually. I've created one for the job orchestration on the top level where I'm calling some other packages. And just to have something for a demo in terms of a hierarchy, I've created a kind of dummy package calling another package, which can be a scenario. And the reason I've done that is just to show you how that will appear in Xpert BI in a pipeline graph. So this is the same package, okay? And it's calling that package, that's calling the other package, this bottom package. So it's a lot easier to govern and to manage when it comes to where are the different pipelines used, where, sorry, I said package, it's from SSIS, it's a pipeline, and which pipeline is calling which other pipeline. It's a tree. You can also kind of switch focus if you want to navigate up and down this tree graph. This graph does not show anything of what each pipeline is doing. It's basically just a pipeline dependency. In addition to that, we have something that we call a job orchestration dependency. And that can be a little bit more complicated and vast because here are all the activities. So when this activity is calling another pipeline, then I can expand that to see which activities are within that pipeline. And if that pipeline again is calling another pipeline, then I can expand to see the activities. And here you can see that this can become quite vast, but it also gives you a better activity lineage as to what is happening when and in which order. And this will work even for your existing data factory pipelines. Okay. Let's continue. So the next thing is, okay, I'm running this, and I actually, I'm not at the end of the month yet, but I want to know what this is costing me. Okay, so I can then run an analysis for the last 30 days. Maybe that was a bad example. Let's see. Let's do that one. And it's then looking through the logs in Azure, but it's combining all the data. So I can see on a high level from that pipeline, that parent pipeline, what that's actually costing to run, and per activity under what's it costing. So as we were testing this, I said, I think this is a bug. There's 0 here. Well, that's actually not a bug. It's because I'm running this on this machine and Azure is not billing me for it. The only thing it's billing me for is when I'm calling the activities itself that's calling the other pipelines. I have another factory which I'm running in native Azure. That could be interesting to watch the cost analysis for, to see, okay, so this VM is costing me so and so much. Is it better just to get rid of the VM and rather just run it all as service managed services? The database as a managed service and the application database as a SQL database, because then all the processing is happening as a service, and you're paying for it in Azure. So here we see the same thing, that the pipeline is costing a fixed amount of cost, but then all the other activities are billed. And you have the execution time, you have the billable time, and you can see how everything is being charged. You can also look at it from a timeline perspective. So here I probably just included a few tables and I added to the whole data source and something happened, right? So this can be used. You can sort on cost to see what's your least and most expensive things. To do this, to find your cost drivers in Azure. And this will also work for your existing data factory pipelines. It does not need to be created by Xpert BI. So, okay. So let's look at the feature where I have an example set up of publishing the same data that I've actually loaded now into my SQL server. Say my organization also has an Amazon environment, and some data analysts there or data scientists, they need some of these data. Then I can actually just do this migrate demo system and make another instance of it. So I still want to run it into my SQL server, but I want to be able to also take the exact same data, maybe on a different schedule, but running into AWS S3. So now you see there's another instance here. Here I can then set destination. Here I have a lot of different options, so I can push it also into Synapse, into Azure Data Lake, and into Amazon S3. I can set the connection here, and to save you from looking at that, I can show you the exact same thing that I've done here, where I've set the destination to a data lake here. When that is done, I can then run it. So hopefully this will work if all my connections are right, are okay. Okay, so now it actually did this. It only had one task, and that was a copy activity into the S3. I should also have this bucket open. So here I'm in Amazon, have this bucket open. It's doing the same thing as it, I loaded some tables earlier. This was this table. So it's doing the same thing as it does in the data lake, where it creates a structure for when you loaded the data. And this was the 18th today, And here is the file that we loaded just now. Okay, so I think I'm on time now, right? Not bad, not bad. I have another slide for you. Okay. So let's just go in view mode for that. It doesn't want to cooperate today. Display and swap. Okay, so like I said, there's a few more things that is included in this release, and when the release is published, all of this will be available online. Another thing, this is a sneak peek. We will have an online user community forum. It's coming soon. Here we will list the FAQ, which we already have on our website. But the most cool thing that we're really excited about is the community conversation forum, where you can also do feature requests and posts, and you can get ratings and yeah, actually be interactive with all of our users. Then I would like to say thank you all for joining. I'm looking here, there is no questions, means that nobody understood anything or everybody understood everything, which I'm hoping for the latest. Then I will say thank you, have a good Friday, and have a good weekend when that arrives for you all. Thank you.